In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy Podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. Tonight, we get into the Gladiator pit and do the 2000 film starring Russell Crowe, Gladiator, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Episode Ever, Episode 88 of the Actual Anarchy show. And you can find the show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/88. And, you know, now that I've mentioned the episode number, we should have gone and done Back to the Future, Robert. 88.
You blew it.
We blew it so bad on this one. Oh, geez. Anyway, I hope you guys will forgive us. We got all hyped up about Gladiator on the last episode, and so here we are. We've watched it. We've got copious notes, and I think it's going to be an interesting episode. I think it'll be fun. But how you doing? Before we get into the last nighters portion of the show, I do want to mention one other thing to you, but let's find out how you are, sir.
I am feeling quite well, sir. I'm well rested. Had a good day yesterday. It's nice and cool today. I am relaxed. I am my thirst. Feeling good. I can't talk, but that's not important. We've done podcasts before where I wasn't able to form words.
I think the last couple of our episodes, we might as well have not been forming words, so I think it's par for the course for us lately. And it just dawned on me, actually, that because we now have the split between the normie-friendly version of the show and the hardcore anarchist version of the show, we get a second chance at show 88, because we're on 31 of the Last Nighters. So another, year, and we can get into Back to the Future, and that can be episode 88 of the Last Nighters.
Yes, we will redeem ourselves. That'll be good.
All right, I'm marking it right now on the calendar. That's what we're going to do. All right, so one other piquant note that I wanted to mention is that I told you about projecting my air conditioner into my office, and actually got some questions about what kind of air conditioner did you get, because it's so amazingly good at what it does as compared to the other units that we've had out here. So yes. I've put together a link, and I'll also include this in the show notes page at actualanarchy.com/88 of the air conditioner I have. I definitely recommend it, and it's called a Climate Right, and it sits outside of a building or a structure, and you cut some holes into the structure and feed the hoses in. But it is so effective, and it was like $500. So about as much as one of those, roll around your room ones that you vent out of a window, but it's just way more effective. So that'll be on our show notes page.
And it's whisper quiet, isn't it, since all the machinery is outside?
Yeah, I can have it on and still record a show, which is great. It's not on right now because it's cooled off significantly, but we're going to get another, heat wave next week. So I'll be having that thing humming.
I'm not looking forward to that heat wave next week.
Yeah, especially where you are, because it's even hotter than here. But
it's supposed to get to 108.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Yep.
That's like Arizona hot. Man, that's brutal.
Yeah. That's
like being in the Gladiator pit hot.
In the pit.
All right, we're about to get
There won't be Russell Crowe trying to chop me in half, but
well, there is
it'll
that.
Still be bad.
There's that. That's the only drawback. So anyway, the air conditioner will be on the show notes page, and I'm also going to create a link. So at actualanarchy.com/AC, the letters AC, that'll take you to the listing on Amazon if you want to check it out. And if you buy it, I'll get a little commission. Make a deal. It'll be great. All right. if you're ready, we can go to the Last Nighters.
I am prepared and entertained.
Do. Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Robert, the Last Nighters, and we are going to entertain you, if that's not why you are here, on episode 31 of the show. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/31. We're going to do Gladiator. And speaking of gladiators, how you doing, Robert?
Yes. Feeling good, sir. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, grand, wonderful. Get on the bus. All right, here is the Google description. Gladiator came out the year 2000, 2 hours and 51 minutes, so it's got some length to it. 8.5 on the IMDb, 77% Rotten Tomatoes, 67% Metacritic, and yet 93% of Google users like it. The interesting thing about the critics, the Metacritic being relatively low, is this won Best Picture, Best Actor, and several other awards, so I guess the critics were a little off base on this one. But here is the description. Set in Roman times, the story of a once powerful general forced to become a common gladiator. The emperor's son is enraged when he is passed over as heir in favor of his father's favorite general. He kills his father and arranges the murder of the general's family, and the general is sold into slavery to be trained as a gladiator, but his subsequent popularity in the arena threatens the throne. Came out May 5th, 2000. Director Ridley Scott won Academy Awards, as I said a moment ago, starring Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix, among others. What say you, sir, about the description so far?
Well, it's accurate. Tells you a lot about the movie. This is Russell Crowe at essentially the height of his powers, and this is Joaquin Phoenix doing his creepiest Joaquin Phoenix impression. This is him at his most just sycophantic type. I don't know if that's not the right word, but just a very damaged individual. He's a lot of fun to watch in this movie. But
yeah, he took that creep factor to 11 for sure on this.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the whole incest angle. There's the whole threatening the woman who's your sister, who you were trying to have sex with murdering his child. He does all kinds of fun stuff. It's interesting. I did watch. I don't know if I watched the original, DVD bonus features, and they had historians talking about the real Commodus. And apparently the real Commodus, I don't know if he was a creepy, incestuous, weirdo guy, but he did actually fight people in the gladiator's pit, and he was quite famous for doing that. So that part isn't too outrageous. I don't think he was murdered or, fought to the death in a gladiator's fight. But, and I think this is fairly well known, but the way it's depicted, the fights in this movie, they are ramped up significantly from reality. Most often, one gladiator would fight another gladiator to first blood, not to the death. And deaths were actually quite rare because, human beings are fairly expensive, even if you do. I mean, they did feed, Christians to the lions and that sort of thing. But a well-trained, honed gladiator could actually command, an audience, was actually a fairly valuable commodity. And they didn't just want to throw those people away. But it's still a good movie. Had a lot of fun. Even rewatching it now, a third or fourth time, probably.
Yeah. Now, did you notice any difference in having seen it some, 15 odd years ago to probably a few years ago and then to now with your intellectual journey?
Well, you mean with the intellectual journey? Yeah. I mean, the thing stuck out at me, Marcus Aurelius, he plays this kind of strange character who doesn't really match his actions. He seems to be this wise, they keep talking about him being this wise, philosopher king guy.
Wizard, Dumbledore?
Yeah, Dumbledore. Anyway, so Dumbledore is commanding the legions, or at least he's, there at the front where they're fighting these Germanic hordes. And they're pacifying, the Germanic tribes. And, he says in the very beginning opening statement, it's one last Germanic stronghold needed to fall before the promise of peace throughout the empire. And we talked about this in our Hero episode with Jet Li.
Oh, yeah. Always one victory away from peace. One murder away from perfection.
Right. This is just, that's the communist dream. It's the socialist dream. It's the dream of all tyrants of all time, everywhere, always. It's just always one more death away from utopia. It's this dream of conquering the world, and then there will be peace. Well, and then as all tyrants always find out, people don't much like being ruled. And being tyrannized. So the price of empire is rebellion and resistance, and they get to call it, terrorism or treason, or any number of words that they come up with.
Well, treason is now talking to people who are from another country.
Indeed.
I mean,
that's right.
Per the news feeds.
The definition keeps getting more and more broad. But yeah, this is the dream of all tyrants of all time, everywhere, always. Of, once you kill enough people, once you conquer enough people, then you'll have this kind of Pax Romana, Roman peace that settles in, and we'll just have one world order, and then the world will be all one, and we'll have no more reason to ever fight a war ever, because everybody agrees that this one guy can rule us all better than we can all rule ourselves. Yeah, right. This fatal conceit that you know best for everybody else on the planet. It's ridiculous.
This vexes me. It vexes me. I'm seriously vexed.
Are you vexed? It vexes me too. How could anybody be this stupid? I'm asking you, Daniel. How could anybody be this stupid?
Well, I mean, you would think after one more victory in a 12 years war for peace that everything would be fine, and people should know when they're conquered, strength and honor and all that. So,
right. And then Aurelius, and then he kind of has a moment where he's talking to Maximus, and he's like having this philosophical, crisis sort of thing. And he's like, well, what are people going to think of me after I've died? Was I, the butcher, or was I the just, or who was I? The wise? What were we killing all these people for? The glory of Rome? What is Rome?
Well, that was Crowe's answer, the glory of
right.
Rome. And
glory of Rome.
Dumbledore's like, well, there's always someone left to fight. There's always a new enemy, which he's right. I mean, well, there's always the ability to manufacture an enemy that you can use to instill fear in the populace and say, you need me to protect you from this threat.
That's right. You have to have enemies, or else what do we need all this army for?
Right. Yeah, we talked about this on the Mission Impossible when the John Voight character was basically, hey, the Cold War's over. We're dinosaurs. So we got to come up with a reason to still exist.
Right. Got to manufacture an enemy if we don't actually have one. Yeah, so the main debate in this film, really, is between Maximus, who agreed with Aurelius that the Roman Empire should return to being a republic, whereas Commodus thinks that he should be the emperor, and all the power should remain in the emperor's hands.
Now, I got to tell you, Commodus does have he makes some pretty good points a little bit later.
Let's hear this. Let's hear
film.
Daniel's agreements with Commodus.
Now,
I want to hear it.
I will agree with you that Commodus is a snake, a sea snake even, and skilled with a blade, but he's not a moral man. And his dad even says he must not rule because he's a fucking schemer. He has none of the positive virtues, just ambition and the courage to do evil things to fulfill his ambitions. And it's one of the Hayekian observations of why the worst rise to the top. And he's very much an ends justify the means type person. But he does make the point that when you're comparing an empire versus republic, you've got these senators who flatter and deceive and scheme and work for their own individual interests at the expense of the people who they supposedly represent, and they live far better than them as a result. That his argument is that's superfluous, and we must save Rome from the politicians. And in a way, he's kind of right in the diagnosis that yes, the senators are in it for themselves, and they are generally terrible. But his solution is to become an authoritarian dictator.
Right.
So his solution's not great.
Right. No, it's a giant douche or a turd sandwich situation. It's like, you guys are giant douches, and the solution is turd sandwich. It's not a huge improvement. It's slightly better in that he has a vested interest in the outcome of long-term effects, whereas the senators may be only serving for a certain amount of time. They're there to loot and get out. And his criticisms are probably valid.
I'd agree with you there. He did want to have an heir, granted incestually, of pure blood, and by pure, I think he meant within the family.
Yes.
But his argument was, I want this heir and progeny to be able to rule for 1,000 years. So he did have a long time horizon that he was looking at. But he didn't seem to behave in a manner of caretaking the kingdom, other than the bread and circuses of just keeping the masses, the mob, entertained. And they literally did throw bread at people in the Colosseum.
There was literally bread and circus.
So anyway, I didn't mean to derail you, but that was my my point about Commodus was that he is kind of right that even the Senate is a shit option. But his solution's not any better.
It's two shitty people pointing at each other, calling each other shitty. I mean, it's not like anyone's in the right. I mean, they're right, but they're not in the right. Let's talk about Dumbledore and wanting it to be Maximus, who would be the steward of power until the people were ready to have power restored unto them, or whatever it was he said.
By some weird, representation type arrangement. The Republic, right? So there's really no true representation. There's just the illusion of representation. But yeah, let's talk about that. Why?
Well, because he is looking for somebody who doesn't want the power. He appoints Maximus, and Maximus is like, oh, hell no. That's the last thing I want. I want to go home. You need to reward me for slaughtering all these German people by letting me go home. And Marcus Aurelius is like, nah, gotcha, bitch. You're going to be the ruler because you don't want it. And that's what it must be. It takes somebody who doesn't want the power to wield it to be a good ruler. And I would argue that it doesn't matter if the person wielding the power is moral or not. Aurelius's argument seems to be that Commodus would be a bad ruler because he's immoral, whereas Maximus would be a good ruler because he's moral. He fails to see the act of ruling at all is immoral, regardless of the nature of the ruler. He seems to think, which deservedly so, I mean, here you're not going to get an emperor who says, my position is invalid and immoral. But he's a firm believer in the justness of, the emperor class. Thinks it's a perfectly legitimate position to have, and you just need the right guy sitting in the chair, and then everything's going to be cool.
Well, what's his
plan?
And
I would say, good luck with that, dude. All of human history says otherwise.
All right. At my signal, unleash hell. But he wasn't saying to dissolve the emperorship, right? He was just saying to basically have an arrangement similar to the British arrangement of present times, where the royal family is just more of a showpiece, and the parliament is really the one making the laws and enforcing the laws and with the boot on the neck. Really?
You think that? Maybe. I was thinking more along the lines of Maximus would have the power until he could transfer it to the Senate, and then that would be it. Then he could leave and go home.
So that would abdicate and remove the entire notion of having an emperor?
Yeah, well, it didn't exist before Caesar. Before Caesar, it was a republic, and then Caesar declared himself Caesar, and then they had an emperor.
Okay.
So he's talking about going back to being a republic and just dissolving the class of emperor.
All right. Well noted, and I think that your criticisms are correct, though the definitions or the definition of it, and I don't mean like dictionary definition, but I mean like the nuances, the differences. There are degrees of goodness and badness, and there are preferences. I would rather live under if I'm going to have a rule, I'd rather they be moral rather than immoral.
You'd rather have a goody two-shoes, a busybody who's trying to do good?
Versus a brutal dictator?
Isn't there a quote from somebody who's like, the worst offenses are the goody two-shoes moral busybodies who go around trying to control everybody's life because they think they're doing good?
Right. But just because somebody's moral doesn't mean they're going to go around being a busybody.
Are you talking like you're thinking Maximus is like a Ron Paul type?
There you go. There you go.
There's no way Maximus is a Ron Paul. Maximus believes in the Republic, in the glory of Rome, slaughtering German people for the glory of an idea as a shining beacon to the rest of the world. He believes in empire as a matter of course because you're doing people a favor by slaughtering them.
Strength and honor.
Right.
All right, so let's talk a bit more about the dynamic between Aurelius, Dumbledore, and Commodus, Joaquin, because it seems as if the father was a terrible father to Commodus, and it really caused a rift in their relationship and some psychological trauma and damage. Now, I'm not excusing Commodus's behavior, but what I'm saying is that his father did him no favors in withholding affection and approval and in teaching him how to be a better man, a better person. I feel like Aurelius was derelict in his duty to his own family. And I'd also add that
he was.
I like this.
Hold
on.
Let me just say, you're right. I mean, he was absent. He was at the front fighting wars during Commodus's formative years.
Right.
Right. Okay, so go ahead.
I'm going to put my David Spade hat on for a moment because I am growing my hair out and I almost have a mullet and I'm going to be Joe Dirt for Halloween. But
it's not almost, folks.
It's pretty much there.
It's not almost.
It's great. But I will say this. back when Spade was on SNL doing his movie reviews, and he said, I liked it better the first time when it was called X. So this movie I liked better the first time when it was called Billy Madison.
Are you kidding me?
The same dynamic
Commodus
is almost at
is
play.
Billy Madison. There's no scene in Gladiator where they're sitting around a pool and they're like, what time is it? And he says, October.
What day is it? Nudie Magazine Day. Yeah, October. But yeah. But the dynamic of the father being spoiling the kid but not having an appropriate amount of attention paid to the kid is what I'm keying in on here.
Okay. The absentee father.
Right, because he wanted his father's attention and his affection, and the only way to get attention was to behave like a dickbag and get negative attention. And this was a difficult scene because as he's saying this to his dad, he's like, your fault as a son is my failure as a father. And then Commodus snuffs him out. Like he shows him just how bad his faults were or his failure was.
Yes. Yeah. I can't disagree with that. He is a terrible father, but we don't get to see that. All we get to see are, what people say about it. And he admits it himself. And we know that he was out fighting wars while Commodus is growing up. I mean, we assume Commodus is like, early 20s. I mean, I'm sure Joaquin Phoenix was older when he played the part, but I think we're assuming that he's like a young man. And so, yeah, he's a piece of shit. But I don't think, you're right. It doesn't excuse Commodus's behavior. Just because you don't raise a child properly, that doesn't give him the right to murder you.
I will agree.
I wouldn't...
Circle gets the square on that one.
Okay. All right. Good.
Here we are just agreeing with each other. That's what we do here on the show. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Commodus's decision after killing his dad to basically say to Maximus, hey, kiss the ring or I'm going to murder you.
Yeah, it's an open threat. I think, Maximus knew immediately that he had to shore up power. It was a critical situation, he was the only one who knew that Aurelius picked him to be the successor.
Well, and the daughter knew, right?
Well, the daughter probably suspected, but she didn't openly know, and she wasn't going to challenge Commodus. But Commodus immediately steps up to shore up power, and if he's got a rival to the throne, which is, throughout history, fratricide is rife among, royal families and that sort of thing. There's always tales of firstborn sons murdering all his brothers. That's a frequent thing throughout history. So yeah, Commodus's behavior there is completely not surprising. But I thought Maximus was being a little bit naive there. I mean, here he is essentially the crown prince versus Maximus, like the leader of the army. But when it comes down to it, who are people really going to follow? They believe in the state. I mean, although Roman history is interesting because, we're talking about Julius Caesar, who led his armies crossing the Rubicon into Rome because he had the loyalty of his army. And that was what allowed him to, claim the emperorship because he, essentially threatened everybody in Rome that either I'm going to be emperor or I'm just going to kill you all. So it is interesting that there were often times throughout Roman history where the generals who led the legions commanded, probably more loyalty than, some politician in Rome over those people.
Seemed to be the situation here.
Right.
Because the army was a big fan of Maximus. And then even when we get the first entrance of Commodus into Rome, the people are yelling at him like, boo, you suck, Yeah.
Yeah, but then he goes on to give him bread and circus, Daniel.
150
and
days.
Everybody loves him. Everybody loves him.
I did have a question for you before we get into that part.
Go ahead.
So Maximus staves off execution, fights his way out of that, and then he rides nonstop.
You can't keep a good Russell Crowe down.
No, you can't. But he rides nonstop back to Spain, and he gets there just in time to find, the corpses of his family. And in watching that, I'm like, well, if he went there as quickly as possible, how did his family get murdered before he got there?
You're asking me, well, because there's talk. People. The murders weren't carried out by the same people in his army. They're carried out, I'm sure, by other Roman soldiers elsewhere that were given an order.
Right, so like pigeons sending communications or perhaps boats and things like that.
Yeah, other horses. I mean, he's riding one horse, but, as long as you can send word back to Rome, I don't know exactly clear on how information traveled, but I'm sure it traveled faster than one guy riding one horse. But did that little discrepancy, you thought, did that kind of bother you?
It stood out, but it sort of makes sense that word could travel faster than a person, especially if you're talking about on the water or if they had other means of transmitting just notes. Like in Game of Thrones, they're always sending messages via
Ravens.
Yeah, the
Or
ravens.
signal fires, Daniel. Signal fires.
Yeah, yep, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sure. I didn't. It didn't bother me. I figured that there was just some kind of Roman Pony Express or something like that. Maybe pigeons or ravens or any number of things that could carry messages.
Yeah, the Roman USPS.
The Roman post office. I'm sure. I'm sure it was a thing. I don't know if I'm misremembering, or whatever, but I think that they had like a post office sort of thing, like they delivered the mail, and that was like it's like, well, they're brutally repressing us, but they keep the mail delivered on time. Well, that's good.
And the Roman roads.
And they got the Roman roads and the aqueducts. So, although the aqueducts weren't for everybody, it was mainly for people in Rome, but
Yeah,
and they were made out of lead pipes, so everybody went crazy. But it's the way it goes.
Yeah. Now, was that perhaps contributing to Commodus's situation? He did seem to be a bit on the mental illness side of things here.
Yeah, they seem to take in some bits from other emperors. Famously Nero danced while Rome burned. And I think Nero is the one that also appointed his horse general. Was it Nero or was it somebody else? I think it was Nero. I could be wrong. But I know some emperor appointed his horse as leader of his army. So it's a thing. People do it.
Well, I saw
lead can mess you up, dude.
A dog became mayor somewhere.
Yeah, but in defense of that town, he does a better job than any human.
And there's a tree that owns itself. And the great Glenn Jacobs just became a mayor. Not that he's like a dog or a tree, but that's...
Is he better than a dog or a tree?
He's a Rothbardian Austrian economist type person. So yeah, I think that's probably better.
Better than a dog as mayor.
Well, I mean, a dog is pretty much the ideal mayor. So if Glenn Jacobs, Kane from WWE, is better than a dog, he's like probably the best mayor ever.
Would Kane get your slippers? I don't know.
Chew him up.
Would he wag his tail and want some pets? Sit on your lap?
He would crush me to death.
I don't know if I'd want him sitting on my lap.
No, he's a big man. He's a big guy.
He could body slam you with one arm.
All right, so let's talk about queer giraffes.
Finally. How many episodes have we done and we're finally getting to the queer giraffes?
Or 31. This is 31.
So good.
Took us 31 episodes to get to the queer giraffes. Proximo, who was played by Oliver Reed, and this is his final performance. And the interesting note here is he actually died before completing his performance. So they had a body double and significant digital work to finish his performance. It cost upwards of $3 million for about 15 seconds of screen time, which seems outrageous. But if you think about it, 2000, and this film was well noted for its great use of digital effects at the time. And very expensive, but it looks very dated now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of compositing, especially in the Gladiator fight where there's all those lions being released.
The tigers.
There's a fair amount. Oh, that's right, the tigers. Yeah. They don't look. It doesn't look nearly as good as it once did. Those tigers do not look like they're in the same space as Russell Crowe. But
Yeah, the thing.
Hey, it was 2000. That's 18 years ago.
Right, and back in 2000, we were like, "This is the future, man. Y2K, we've survived."
We did it. We did it, everybody. The world was supposed to blow up, but it didn't.
Yeah. But, it seemed at the time that, technology was fairly well advanced. But looking back,
so Daniel,
very...
You're in the...
very basic.
Yeah, it is. It's fairly basic now. And hopefully the technology today will look basic to the eyes of 18 years from now. Because I'm all about progress, Daniel. Capitalism, baby. Incentives. Anyway, so you're in the market for some giraffes, right? And
yeah.
I've got some.
I've
got some giraffes. Do you want to buy these giraffes of your own free will, your own accord? You're making the free decision to buy these giraffes. You can inspect them all on your own, and then you decide whether you want to buy them or not. I'm just offering them up for sale. So I don't want to hear about it when you buy them, and a couple months later, you grab me by the balls and say that I sold you queer giraffes, all right?
All right, so my rebuttal to that, you make a fair point. But if you, the seller, misrepresented the giraffes as male and female for mating purposes, and I want them for mating, and you say,
what are you talking about?
I got a male and a female here, I'm selling to you.
Yeah.
If you fraudulently...
That wasn't what your complaint was. That wasn't your complaint. You're free to inspect their sex organs. And that wasn't even Proximo's complaint. His complaint was that they were queer giraffes.
Yeah, he said that they won't mate.
Right.
Which seems odd to say that they would be queer with no mating. Okay, let me rephrase this a little bit. My understanding is that they would still perform similar behaviors for gratification, not for mating purposes. Do you see what
Okay, here's how I understand the situation. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not sorry.
This is so important. This is like the integral part of the show.
This
here.
is the crux of this movie. Okay, this one-off scene that it's like 20 seconds long.
There's ball grabbing and queer giraffes. It's very important. It's vital.
That's right. So he sold them a male and a female giraffe, but they are queer giraffes who prefer the company of their similar sexed giraffes, right? So they've got a male and a female giraffe, but just who aren't into each other. That's how I understand the situation to be. Are you understanding the same situation, or do you have a different situation in mind?
Oh, yeah. See, I thought that his complaint was he intended to buy a male and female to create offspring. So he wanted them for mating, for breeding purposes.
Right.
And that he was led to believe that he was sold a male and a female.
Okay.
But in fact, he got two males.
Okay. If whatever his name was, slave guy, was purporting to say, yeah, I've got a male and a female. Okay, I'll sell you a male and a female. I guarantee you that they're male and a female, and then sold him two males or two females. Then I think Proximo probably has a legitimate beef. But with my understanding, I don't think he has a legitimate beef. The idea that you're guaranteed two giraffes who want to bone each other is fairly ridiculous. It's not like the slave guy can go, oh yeah, I got these two horny giraffes and they're totally horny for each other. And then they're just going to be making all kinds of giraffe babies. Right. And guaranteed, dude. Guaranteed. I don't think so. I think he's like, I got a male and I got a female. Here you go. And then Proximo's like, yo, these two giraffes aren't horny for each other. They're not boning. They're just walking around, eating my food and shitting all over the place. They're not doing any sex times.
All right.
You sold me some queer giraffes.
We have overspent our time on this, but I just want to reiterate that The Last Nighters is part of the Launchpad Media, where we're always throwing new ideas in your direction. And I bet you didn't think this deep about queer giraffes until just now. So do check us out at thelaunchpadmedia.com.
This is the level of analysis and insight that you'll only get here at The Last Nighters.
It's books, learning, and philosophy.
That's right, baby.
All right, moving on. So Proximo does this thing with giraffes, and he gets a better deal on slaves. And Maximus has been taken from his home as a slave because he had given up on life, and somebody found him there. They helped him recover from injury and let the maggots eat the infection away. And then they trained him to be a gladiator.
Man, I love capitalism. When I saw that maggot arm thing, I was like, I know it seems barbaric these days with what they do if you're listening to this in the future, but just think of the advancements in technology that we've had due to the proper incentives to not have to put maggots on your arm.
Now, is that similar to bleeding with leeches, or is sort of a different thing? Because there was obviously an infection as a result of this injury that had gone untreated and uncleaned, so it was festering, and the maggots were eating away the rotted flesh, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's what they do. I think it's a better solution than the leeches, which is when they would believe that you just had a case of bad blood. Like when people went crazy or they were depressed or, any number of like mental anguishes, they would bleed you because they thought that you had, bad blood, which is like the most ambiguous term of all time.
Now, was Roman also the four humors, like the bile and the blood and two others that they needed to be in
that was
harmony?
started in the Greeks, right? So I think that, the Romans took a lot from the Greeks and we're not a whole lot removed from them. So they probably did.
All right. Well, that works for me. All right. So we're actually running a little bit low on time already, and I have so much more to talk about.
Okay, let's do this rapid fire style.
All right, so a little bit more about Commodus and the Senate, like the two shit burger options between the ruling methods.
Mm-hmm.
So the Senate says they are the people and selected from the people and speak for the people. And as I said earlier, Commodus correctly calls them out on eating better than the people and having better mistresses and basically living off the fat of the system, exploiting people. And he argues back that he will treat the people with love, and he's their father, and they are his children. And an empire needs an emperor, and he won't dissolve the Senate just yet because he needs to leave the people with their illusions. And then he gets the idea of the games because people love victories and war and the greatness of Rome, and the greatness of a vision. That reminded me of Obama's campaign back in 2008, Hope and Change, the greatness of the vision.
Sure. I think this is the classic case of the tyrants using those, immutable desires of human beings to be part of a greater thing, to be part of something good, to believe in, that we're this tribe is really good and strong, and all those positive kind of tribalistic type of things, and just exploiting them for their own purposes.
Yeah, so he's got the 150 days of games to honor the guy who shut down the games. So that's kind of weird. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that's right.
And now,
ultimately, it's all his actions are completely self-serving. I mean, he was throwing those games. I mean, yeah, those people were entertained at the expense of these people who, they were murdering, because these people are not fighting voluntarily. These people are all being forced to kill each other. And he's just reaping the benefits, of the opinion polls and the whatnots. Because ultimately, it's like, rulers realize how precarious their situation is. Hopefully, that they are vastly outnumbered to the number of people who they rule over, and they're tyrannize, and that at any time, the mob can turn against you.
And Rome is the mob.
And Rome is the mob.
Yeah, and as we discussed on the Hunger Games, our last episode, the act of defiance of them taking the poison in the first movie, or saying they were going to take the poison, was an act of defiance to Snow. And we talked about the fragility of how that one act could spur a revolution. Similar here in Gladiator, where Russell Crowe, he denies the high five initially, and that's what gets his family killed.
Right.
Leaves him hanging, and thus Commodus leaves his family hanging. Ooh, bad joke.
Ouch.
Too
soon.
Painful.
Too soon, Daniel.
2,000 years. Too soon. Still too soon. But and then he spites him with killing the retired, or not killing the retired gladiator who he defeats in the tiger fight, the Tigress of Gaul, where
right, he defies the emperor, and he becomes more popular than Commodus, and all the kids want to be him.
Right, and that's another reflection of how an act of defiance can create a more tenuous situation for the supreme leader.
Right, someone's not going according to script. You go off script, we gotta cut you out, and that's constantly seen throughout human history. When someone doesn't play along, they they often end up at the end of an assassin's bullet. But Maximus is a true believer, and he's willing to die. I mean, the whole movie, he's just got one more person to kill. And if I'm him, I'm with him 100%. I know Commodus didn't actually physically kill my family himself. He ordered some other people to do it, and those other people bear moral culpability. But if I'm Maximus, I'm killing Commodus. What are you doing? Are you killing him?
Oh, most definitely. Okay. And
good.
Speaking of the moral culpability on the part of the people carrying out the actions, not questioning the orders, just doing my job, ma'am, just following orders.
Doing your job. Nuremberg defense, baby.
That also applies to, after this merciful act, not killing the Tigress of Gaul, Caesar comes down, has the Roman guard around Maximus, and says, shit to goad Maximus into attacking him. It's like, your son squealed, your wife moaned when we ravaged her. And Commodus is there admitting, like in 3 Billboards, where the guy's at the bar talking about all the shit he did, burning and raping. There's all these guys standing around hearing him admit to doing these horrific acts, and yet they still do their jobs. It's like, it's not even under a veil of service or nationalism or pride or anything like that. I mean, he's literally saying, I murdered your son. I ordered your, wife raped and murdered. And these guys are all just sitting there. Oh, okay.
Oh, is that what we're doing now? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm down. No problem.
Yeah, so I mean, it's so obvious and such an admission of the evil. I don't know how they can continue to delude themselves to keep serving him.
Yeah, I don't know what they tell you. They tell themselves to sleep at night, that they're good people doing good things. Probably something about patriotism and nationalism and the glory of Rome, and how good, how amazing Rome is and how important it is for the rest of the world as a shining beacon of hope. Probably something along those lines. But hope sometimes requires women to get raped and murdered. I guess that's what it takes, and children to be murdered. Just a couple dead kids, whatever. I don't know. You tell me, buddy.
Am I not merciful, Robert?
Am I not merciful? Yeah, as long as you're gonna murder your sister's son, right? Wasn't that the threat? If she so much as looks at him in a displeasing manner that displeases him.
Yeah, now, did that, in the story, that whole interaction of threatening the son, that was her squealing on the plan, right? Of releasing Commodus and leading the army back in?
Releasing Maximus, yeah. Yeah, that was her squealing because, he threatened the son. And she was just being a mama and protecting her child. And, if Maximus has to die, Maximus has got to die. I'm sorry, I'm picking my son every time. And I can't really blame her.
Yeah, it is a tough choice, though,
But-
because she subjects herself to, and others, to untold horrors going forward as a result of this decision.
Right.
And
Absolutely, yeah.
she might not know this at the time of making this decision, but Commodus says to her, if you try to be a hero or displease me in any way, I'll kill you, or kill your son. And if you kill yourself, I'll kill your son.
Yeah. That's pretty rough.
Right. And
Which is really just a way of saying, okay, do your best job to assassinate me because I'm just a complete horrific piece of shit that you would never in a million years want to live with. I mean, if I'm her at that point, I'm just plotting out every assassination plan I could possibly do. Because why would you ever think that it would be okay to live with a person like that? If someone came up to me and told me that, I would feel completely justified in murdering him any way I could. Threatening to murder my child if I kill myself, or if I even look at him wrong.
And don't pleasure him, right? Because that was the insinuation.
Oh yeah, and then she also has to give him children, have sex with a guy, this insane brother of hers.
It's a dream, a frightful dream. Life is.
I would be plotting his murder 1,000 times over. I'd be looking for allies, or I'd just do it myself. Poison. I'd be getting it. I'd be setting traps around the palace. I'd be doing everything I could do. Take him out. But, in real history, crazy people lived for quite a while. People didn't just kill him. I mean, people do get killed all the time in history, but I'm just saying. I mean, I don't know how Commodus actually died, and probably the story is mostly Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's bits and pieces, like you were saying before, of various stories, historical inaccuracies abound.
Yeah, but I think it's a well-told story. I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, there's a reason. It's pretty much a classic. The visual effects don't quite hold up, but the acting is all really good.
Yeah, and there's an interesting note about the acting in that, similar to many of the movies we've talked about recently, they didn't have the script fully vetted out or written down. And I guess this is where Russell Crowe got his reputation for being difficult to work with, because they were still writing his lines on set. So he didn't even have any lines to prepare for. And so he was very flustered by this. Now, he, of course...
As any normal human being would be.
Right. And he won an Academy Award as a result of his performance here. But it's just interesting that a huge production like this goes this far to where they're writing the lines on set the day of to record them.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, I realize some filmmaking is flying by the seat of your pants because there's a lot of rewrites that happen, and there are a lot of producers that come on. You run out of money and you bring in another producer, and then that new producer has ideas, and so then you have to make changes. And I can imagine there being some rewrites, but if you're coming up with dialogue on the spot, day of, on a repeated basis throughout the shooting, that's got to be aggravating, because as an actor you definitely need time to rehearse and prepare, and that's you need time for ideas to germinate in your brain. You can workshop a scene with other actors, and you can do the same scene 10 times, 20 times, and they'll all be different. Every single time you do that scene, it'll be different, because you'll think of a different thing to do. You'll come up with a new flourish of movement, or maybe you'll stand up dramatically while you say one line instead of saying it calmly and demurely. There's any number of ways that you could, just bring a whole new life to a scene, and in total in a movie, by having time to prepare, time to work on scenes and dialogue with your fellow performers.
So apparently Crowe is just such a boss in the acting department that he was still able to pull it out.
Yeah, he did a good job.
Give us a pretty solid performance here.
Well acted. And Commodus is fantastic creep. He's really good. Dumbledore was good Dumbledore, I guess. Yeah, the lady didn't have as much to do, but she still did a good job. The senators were, kind of smarmy politician types. But there weren't that many actors, main actor guys in the movie. It's really kind of a small cast with a ton of, extras.
Yeah, for a sweeping epic, there's probably only, a dozen or so people with lines, really.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so let's start to wind this down because we're getting low on time. But before we get into our final summary and review, I wanted to ask you about the final act, where Commodus, as a result of Maximus having won the crowd, are you not entertained, that whole thing. He knew that the only way to kill Maximus was to have it be a public display of them dueling or fighting each other. But of course, he poisoned Maximus prior to the combat. So a bit of a cheat there, and Maximus is like stumbling around, and yet is still able to kill Commodus and fulfill his desires, his destiny.
Indeed. I felt like you were going to ask a question there.
Well, okay, here is a question. Do you think that maybe he fought him a bit too soon if he'd waited just another 5 minutes?
Give it time, Commodus. Wait for that poison to work its way into the veins. Well, I thought that the whole Commodus fighting Maximus thing was a pure Hollywood type of thing. I don't see ever an emperor, personally killing somebody that he wants executed. And throughout history, emperors just go, take him away, take his head off, and I'm done with it. I know it worked for this story because then the hero gets a chance to, blah, 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 finish his arc and kill the bad guy and stuff. But in real life, Maximus is dead. Commodus sits on the throne another 20 years or another 5 years before his sister kills him. And then we move on to the next crappy emperor and the next crappy emperor and the next crappy emperor until Rome falls. But in this movie, yeah, I didn't really buy the whole Commodus actually wanting to fight Maximus. I mean, they set it up earlier in the movie that Commodus was a bit of a stud with swords, and he fought, a whole bunch of people, and he's good at actually fighting. But the idea that he's actually going to go toe to toe with this guy who was literally slaughtered, dozens of people, probably hundreds in his life, and he's just like the world's most amazing tactician and fighter, even injured and poisoned. Yeah, seems like a bit of a risk, even for a crazy person like Commodus. But that's okay. It's not a perfect movie in my estimation, but it's a really fun ride, and it's deserving the reputation that it has, I think.
It sounds like you've gotten into final summary and review territory already, sir.
Yeah, I know we're running a long time, so I thought I'd just kind of ease into it.
Just slide it in?
Just slide it in like a knife to the ribs, like a poisoned knife to the ribs.
All right, so I'll interrupt you just for a moment and ask you if you bought the turn from the pivotal character, Quintus.
Yeah, so Quintus, you're talking about when Commodus asks for a sword, and Quintus is like, don't give him one?
Right, yeah, he orders the men to not give him a sword. Meanwhile, every other instance of Quintus prior in the film is just following orders.
Yeah, he's total lapdog the rest of the time. And then all of a sudden, at this pivotal moment, he decides to, he doesn't want Commodus to win? Does he, what did he expect? I mean, if Commodus kills Maximus and wins, that's a death sentence, right? I mean, you're asking to get murdered. But we're never treated to a scene where Quintus, really questions Commodus or really thinks about, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? He really is a piece of shit. I need to change my ways. We need to get rid of this Commodus guy. Maybe if there had been, Commodus' sister would have been like, yo, Quintus. Or if he had gone to the sister and been like, yo, yeah, Commodus, he's no good.
He's got to go.
Rid of him. Yeah, he's got to go. But we didn't get any of those scenes. So it is really sudden and strange that Quintus all of a sudden has some weird sense of honor, that this is a duel to the death and we can't interfere. When has that been the case? You just watched him stab Maximus with a knife in the ribs.
Poison tipped,
and you covered up the wound. So how? What? Maybe he sensed his moment. Yeah, I don't know. I did not buy that. That whole last scene is just kind of a Hollywood rush. Clean up this thread, and we'll wrap up this movie and call it good. It already is a fairly long movie. I tell you, watching it, I thought I was giving 2 hours to finish the movie, and then it just kept going and going, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually quite long.
Yeah, almost 3 hours. And you go ahead and finish your summary and review and give your rating, and then I'll do mine. But yeah, super long. And surprisingly, in a way, because if you think back on it, it's like not a whole lot there's not a whole lot of scenes here, really, for that type of length. Yeah,
there's a lot of subplots that probably could have been cut. I don't know. I mean, there's the whole Proximo kind of subplot, and then there's, of course, the sister subplot. But I don't know how satisfying those are. Ultimately, did they justify the length? For me, yeah, probably. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but it's enough of a good movie. This is back at the time when Russell Crowe was really at the height of his powers. I don't know if Master and Commander came out after this or slightly before it. Was it after?
Yeah, this was his big break.
Yeah, this is him like really stepping into the reins of world's greatest actor and making all kinds of money. And good for him, because I really did enjoy his acting. I think he's really strong. I don't know if he's got the most range, but he does do some comedy. I don't know if we've ever talked about, I think, The Nice Guys. That was really good. That was only a couple of years ago. But yeah, so I typically enjoy Russell Crowe. as an actor, and I think he's really strong in this. And Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic. You can't help but hate the guy and just think he's such a creep. I mean, you can't watch this movie and not feel physically revulsed by Commodus. Everything he does, and yet he, it's fairly believable. I mean, he's not just evil for evil's sake. He's a damaged human being who was never taught to be a good human being. And he's a product of his environment for the most part. And then he's probably also crazy with the whole lead poisoning. Who knows? But he does a great job. And it's amazing that the script is as good as it is and that the story is as cohesive as it is for being worked on up to the last minute. So for my final number, I'm going to give Gladiator, starring Russell Crowe. 8.2. Really good. Really, really good movie. Not perfect, but highly recommended.
You are merciful.
I am. Am I not?
All right, so on my signal, I'm going to unleash hell. This movie did not age very well. I agree with you that the performances are strong, and Joaquin Phoenix especially. I mean, you're right. Loathsome is the right term for that guy. And it's also, Russell Crowe, very strong. But there was so much, like, kinetic action in the fighting scenes, like, so close up. You can't really see anything about what's going on. And then there's all these like trippy, super fisheye, off-color, reversed shots that it just kind of felt messy and sloppy to me. And I feel really bad, criticizing Ridley Scott, who's like a great director. But it just didn't seem, the effect wasn't there for me. It aged very poorly. And you also add in the digital effects and the, the back lighting effect of Commodus overlooking Rome in the sunset. I mean, it just totally looks like worse than the Weather Girl level of blue screen, green screen effect. But overall, it's still an interesting and entertaining story. And I think that when I first saw it, back when it came out, 2000, 2001, that time period, I was probably more blown away by it. But still, a decent movie. Still a well-told story despite the issues with the script not being complete until the end, but perhaps that helped to spur Russell Crowe into giving the performance that he did. So I still think it's a good movie, but I'm going to be much lower, and I'm going to go with a 6.5 on this guy.
Wow. Well, I think this shows how much of a sucker I am for a revenge story. I tend to give them at least a point or two higher just for that fact. And this is a pretty good one.
Well, you're not,
even if the ultimate revenge at the end is kind of wonky.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. Death smiles at us all, and all a man can do is smile back.
That's right.
But generally, pretty good. Generally. And I didn't mean to like dog on the movie too much at the end there. It was entertaining. I was entertained.
Good, yeah. I don't think you can watch this movie and not be entertained. It's a fairly human story, of a guy who just wants to go home and be with his family. I think so many people can identify with that. And then here's this asshole Commodus who, gets in the way of that and murders his family. Yeah. And so, yeah, go apeshit on his ass.
I will say that the fighting isn't as impressive after watching like 300 and the series Spartacus, where the fighting is far more gruesome and explicit, like more
visceral.
Yeah, it's like you really feel it. I mean, they're showing severed shit happening. You see it a little bit here in Gladiator, like a guy's arm gets cut off and a guy's head gets cut off. But the action shots are so tight, and the sword swinging action is like kind of, I don't know, like rehearsal speed, if you will. I don't know. It just didn't. I didn't have that tangible feel of, oh, they're actually fighting, versus what you see in 300, where there's splatters of blood and all these digital effects and more gruesome shit. It just seems a little bit more polished in a way.
Well, yeah. Well, 300 is very cranked up. It's like real action cranked up, and that's all comic book stylized. I mean, I haven't seen Spartacus, but there's a lot more freedom you can do with special effects when you can just swing a computerized sword at a person and then lop off digitally erase the guy's head and lop off a computerized CGI head. It's it's a little more easy to do instead of back in the day when you actually had to do shit for real.
It seems like we talked about this a little bit, but like the special effects of the year 2000 or 99, 98 when this was being created really was almost archaic. as compared to what can be done today. And that was
you're only like 4 years out of Jurassic Park, so CGI is still in its infancy.
Yeah, and it's also surprising when we did the Cars episode that they were saying like to get the reflections right, they had, to have these supercomputers and they were creating new software and it was like so bleeding edge. And I'm just like, my kids watch this kind of shit on TV all the time, like these kinds of shows. It doesn't seem like it's that baller, but that was because Cars, they created that technology and they were trailblazing it. They were like customizing it, creating it for their own purposes and incurring all the research and development costs.
Absolutely.
And now
Pixar was
it's
really
available.
pushing the envelope.
Yeah, so it's like the same with, it's the capitalist model, right?
Right. They're paying the bleeding edge price.
Right, the early adopters.
The early adopters, and then everybody else gets it for $50 a couple years later.
Yeah, and that's like, when everyone complains about, it's only for the rich. Well, now, just wait. Like a cell phone was for the rich 20 years ago or 25 years ago.
Flat screen TV was for the rich.
A Zach Morris cell phone was like $2,000 and came in a backpack.
Yeah.
And now they're giving them away. Anyway, so this is basically the story of a general who became a slave who became a gladiator, and a gladiator who defied an emperor. And we're going to have to leave it there on The Last Nighters. This is episode 31. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/31. Also at the Launchpad Media, where they're always throwing new ideas in your direction. They've got tons of exclusive shows and content coming out every day. So check that out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. Oh, and Robert, one other thing I wanted to remind everyone is that we've been doing a series with Liberty Weekly discussing the Netflix series Wild Wild Country, and it's been going really well. We've been having guest hosts. The most recent one we had was with Peaceful Treason, and those are a great group of guys. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, go to libertyweekly.net/WWC. So thank you for joining us. And Robert, if you want to say a final word before we say goodnight.
Thanks for sticking through us with this one. Come back for the next episode. We're going to get deep into World War II. The anniversary of the dropping of the bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki is coming up, and we're going to take it pretty dang serious. So, but it's going to be a really interesting discussion. We're going to get into all kinds of history and cultural effects and just aggression versus defense and all kinds of tangled issues on the next episode. So stick with us for that.
Yeah, and that's going to be on the anime film Barefoot Gen, which you can find on YouTube. So if you're interested, give that a watch before you join us next week where we will discuss it. And the anniversary of the bombs being dropped is August the 6th. So that's coming up right around the corner here. But we will be talking about it next week on The Last Nighters. So thank you guys again for joining us. And I'll say good night from last night. And we'll continue the transmission a little bit longer on the Actual Anarchy podcast. The show notes and more for this episode on Gladiator can be found at actualanarchy.com/88.
Good episode, Daniel.
Yes, good job, sir. I'm glad that we took 15 minutes in the middle to talk about queer giraffes.
That was my favorite bit. Literally my favorite bit. If we did more breakdowns like that of ridiculous shit, I think it would be a improvement on the show. I really did enjoy that part.
Okay.
Because we got to talk about the stuff that matters,
All right. Well, if we can do, maybe not on Barefoot Gen, but
yeah, maybe not, but we'll see.
All right. Sounds good.
It's a little bit
man.
too serious of a subject matter.
And if you recall from the beginning of the episode, the air conditioner that I have out here, which by the way is stellar, you can find that on the show notes page as well, or find it at actualanarchy.com/AC. Take you straight to the Amazon listing and check it out. It's a good thing. I like it. Oh, and it's also
a good thing.
It also doubles as a heater, so I'm going to be using that mofo out here in the winter times. So
full on climate control. Very nice, Daniel.
Oh yeah, it's high end. It's meant actually for dog houses, but it works
so
for me.
So you are actually into the doghouse.
Well, not with the wife, but yeah, sort of. I'm kind of in the doghouse, yeah, a little bit.
Okay,
a little bit. So were you not entertained? I feel like that was a pretty decent episode there, sir.
Yeah, I liked it. There's a lot of interesting stuff associated around with that movie, and I'm sure we probably left some content on the cutting room floor. That's the way it goes. We can maybe do some Kathleen Turner overdrive, and if address any further notes you may have. I might have had a note or two that we missed as well. But yeah, solid movie, generated some interesting content, I think, and I think the next one will too. We'll see.
I agree. All right. So any last words for our Actual Anarchy listeners before we do get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon subscribers? And if you want to get a piece of that action, go to actualanarchy.com/Patreon and support us at, I think, the $5 or more per month level, and you'll get access to that, including pre-show content. And I got to say, Robert, I think the pre-show content on this episode was quite interesting.
Oh, I'm glad you had you actually had an interesting story. I had a mundane story, but anytime you interact with the police, there's a tension there that just exists. It shouldn't be there, I don't think. Like if some rando person was walking around with a gun, most regular people, I think, would freak out. But then everybody's okay with the cops walking around with a gun. But I'm the opposite. When I see a cop walking around, they always got the gun on their hip, which fine, if you're a regular person, fine. But when you see a cop with a gun, there's that implicit, this could end badly at any moment. They're the great escalators. All they need is some sort of thing out of the ordinary to happen, and suddenly they're reaching for their gun. And I don't know, it just puts me on edge, man. I don't like it. It makes me nervous.
All right, so Robert, you might be overselling the pre-show content a little bit. It's not like that crazy. But it is interesting. So if you want to check it out, you know what to do. Patreon.
That's right, baby.
All right, well, let's get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive. So thank you guys, our audience, for joining us. You can share the normie-friendly version of the show with your friends, family, and friends. That's available on the launchpadmedia.com or also at the Last Nighters. So lastnighters.com/31. The show notes for the Actual Anarchy version can be found at actualanarchy.com/88. So thank you guys again for joining us, and we'll get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive. Maximum freedom, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.